Viewers strongly cautioned, the following contains no footage of Outlaw Star. If you believe you see any clip of Outlaw Star, that is only from your acute paranoid delusion. Please seek professional help immediately.
Otaku are all over the map when it comes to individual tastes and preferences. Some might be magical girl fans who think that Madoka Magica is a brave and irreverent twist on the genre, and some might be seinen fans who think that there should finally be a proper ending to Berserk, and some might be both. But if there was one title that could unite all these tribes of fans under one identity, it would be Cowboy Bebop. Simply put, it's the standard by which all series are measured by, and from my point of view, rightfully so. Everyone has their own story about the first time they saw Bebop. Maybe some friend of ours who had cable was just raving about the show and made us rent it on VHS at our local Bradley Video. You know, the one that was used in Scream. Yeah, and when we sat down to watch it, we couldn't focus because we only had one TV at the time and it was in the living room, so we had to put up with our dad who kept interrupting the show with his questions about the who's and what's and why's and completely ruining it. Or was that just me? If I could be honest, the very first episode I ever watched was not a very noteworthy episode. Heavy Metal Queen. I didn't really get it, or why my friend at the time couldn't stop raving about it, but I decided to keep with the series. Slowly but surely, as the episodes began to trickle their way through my 12-year-old brain, staring at the TV at way past his bedtime on Saturday nights, the series began to grab a hold of me. Soon I was buying overpriced DVDs and becoming achingly familiar with Dolby Digital promos. Go ahead. Tell me that doesn't give you a raging nostalgia boner. I dare you. Hell, I was such a raging fanboy that I practically begged my brother to get me the Cowboy Bebop movie for Christmas, even though it would be 2 whole years before we got an official release. I still don't know what the man had to go through to find this bootleg in 2002, and part of me doesn't want to. Incidentally, this is the reason why I insist on calling the film Knocking on Heaven's Door. Suck my nuts, Dylan. It was the first anime that Adult Swim showcased, starting on September 2nd, 2001, even before there was a Saturday action block for anime. And from there, the show has been rerun and rerun. It spent pretty much all of 2005 and 6 off the programming schedule, but you can't keep a good show down for long, and it returned in 2007, where it continues to air under the revamped Toonami block. Think about that for a moment. A show with only 26 episodes to its name has been syndicated for almost a decade if you cut out the 2-year hiatus. This show has been on for so long that there is now an entire generation of young otaku that are just about to tune into Bebop for the first time. God damn, do I feel old. I think it's a safe bet that if you're watching this, then you are well aware of Bebop, so I'm not going to be recounting much of the plot for summary purposes. Instead, I aim to examine why Bebop has endeared itself to many an otaku over the years, and why it only became a classic after it was ported over to the States. But before we go in too deep, I feel I should speak my mind about the recent acquisition of Bebop. I was planning to talk about the show for many months now, and it's damn near serendipitous that it's been saved by the Superman of animes, Funimation, just a month before this episode has been released. True, this was a hot property for anyone to pick up and purchase from the all but defunct Bandai, and it was only a matter of time before somebody would pony up the cash for it, but I choose to believe that Funimation did this just for me. Sure, it's great that the show will live on for future generations to watch, and sure, it's great that we're going to get streaming of every episode for free, along with high-def releases and neat packaging, but nothing is going to replace my Bandai collection.
I don't like this setup, Jet. Don't like it at all.
Unlike many of the shows that have been elevated to the status of essential viewing, Cowboy Bebop is unique in that it is strikingly un-Japanese. When you think about important anime, they usually share a common ground in their Japanese and, more broadly, Asian ancestry. Dragon Ball is the easiest example to go by here, and yes, despite my misgivings with the series, I do consider the Dragon Ball franchise to be important. Inspired by the story Journey to the West, a classic Chinese novel, and infused with Asian iconography, the shows are unmistakably Japanese in source and inception. The Gundam series, by comparison, is less obvious, but still safely within the realm of Japanese influence. It's not a far leap to see the visual inspiration of the iconic RX-78 if you're familiar with Japanese samurai armor. Hell, even the leaders of the Principality of Zeon share more than a few notes from different periods of Japanese military history. But Cowboy Bebop? Sure, there are a few Asian influences here and there, but for the most part, it's about as American as pumpkin pie and outsourcing labor. True, the initial run of Bebop in Japan was disastrous, as broadcast standards left a lot of episodes unairable, and the episodes that were aired were shown out of order. Eventually, the show found itself on a Japanese premium network where restrictions are more lax, but this delay caused the production to be so screwed up that the last episode was completed and delivered the day of its broadcast. And this was before Matt Stone and Trey Parker were doing this every week on South Park. What? It's true! With the debut it had, it was no wonder that the show didn't catch fire initially in Japan. But Bebop was not the only title to suffer the same fate. In fact, many of the anime I previously covered followed the same path trailblazed by Bebop. Both the Big O and Trigun were met with lukewarm responses after their initial run in Japan. But it was only after they debuted in America did they get the adulation that was due. Of course, with all of this talk of anime being brought over to the States and finding critical praise, it'd be easy to misconstrue what I'm saying. An anime does not need to westernize itself, for lack of a better term, to be deemed a classic. Hell, some of the best anime ever produced are heavily reliant on Japanese culture and history. For crying out loud, my favorite anime film of all time is a political drama set in an alternate history Japan. I want to make it very clear that just because these shows utilized a style and setting that is very familiar to Americans is not the reason why they're considered good. You get me? Just because they're American does not mean they're good. It's because these shows, and especially Bebop, presented themselves using tropes, visual language, and storytelling mechanics that were more traditionally Western, and did it well, is the reason why they're all so highly regarded. So what is it about Cowboy Bebop that makes it so American? Well, simply put, there's no one thing. The show hops from reference to reference without skipping a beat. Everything from blaxploitation films, to film noir detective stories.
You're under arrest. A setup.
To American westerns.
Andy.
Andy?
Cowboy Bebop homages more American films than Tarantino's entire filmography.
You better not play here. They'll kick us out if you win too much.
Thanks, Mom.
Anime Abandon will return in a moment.
Now, I didn't really open this thing, you know. It just opened up by itself.
Anime Abandon now continues.
From the first episode, Asteroid Blues and their slightly subtle tribute to Desperado, to the more direct alien nod in Toys in the Attic, Shinichiro Watanabe's affinity for American films shine through. But, again, this wouldn't mean much if all this was just an homage. Thankfully, Bebop is a lot more clever than that. It's the way the show's characters interact and react to these outside influences is what makes this show unique unto itself. Yes, it would have been alright if Spike just fought a guy who looks like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar from Game of Death.
So, you a bounty hunter? Or some animal rights chump?
You know, you really make me laugh, Hakeem. Risking your life for a dog that's only worth a fistful of woolongs.
What's it to you?
Nothing but a giggle.
But seeing him teach a guy about Jeet Kune Do and Bruce Lee's philosophy?
It means becoming like clear water.
Water.
Right. Water can take any form. It drifts without effort one moment, then pounds down in a torrent the very next.
Now water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
That is character building. If the show were in lesser hands, then Spike would be in Bruce's yellow motorcycle suit, and that would have been the extent of Spike's character. But by expanding on the pastiche, Spike's character grows as it becomes obvious to the audience that he took Bruce Lee's teachings to heart. And yes, I am counting this moment as an American influence. Enter the Dragon was an American production, it was written in English, and it was financed by Warner Brothers. If Bruce Lee were born in America, there'd be no argument. If there was any doubt left in your mind of Bebop's American identity, then look no further than Laughing Bull, the only Native American character I know of in anime.
A star just fell from the sky.
That is not an ordinary star, my son. That star is the tear of a warrior.
What warrior is it?
A lost soul who has finished his battle somewhere on this planet. A pitiful soul who could not find his way to the lofty realm where the Great Spirit awaits us all.
That part always gives me shivers. The character of Laughing Bull appears only briefly in a few episodes, but he does highlight both Spike's spiritual nature and the setting of the story. A Native American residing on Mars, surrounded by broken technology and expounding warrior wisdom and seer prophecy to both Spike and Jet.
Do not fear death. Death is always at our side. When we show fear, it jumps at us faster than light. But if we do not show fear, it casts its eye upon us gently, and then guides us into infinity.
It never occurred to me how rarely we see Native Americans in anime. I mean, when I sit down to think about it, I can only come up with 2 anime that have native characters. 1, Bebop, and if I stretch the definition, 2, the Mysterious Cities of Gold? Bam! Nostalgia blindsided you, didn't I? Still, the show would be nowhere near the hit that it was or be as culturally significant as it is without its soundtrack. It still remains Yoko Kanno's masterstroke, and it will be a long time before any soundtrack can come close to its profound impact. And yes, the soundtrack is American as fuck. Yes, it was produced entirely in Japan, but of the 50-odd songs used in the show, only a couple of songs are sung in Japanese. More to the point, however, is that the style of music that was the most prevalent, though eclectic as the soundtrack was jazz and blues, the 2 most American musical genres there are. Still, regardless of musical motifs, the soundtrack is what makes the series, from the opening sonorous clashing of drums and sax that opens Tank, to perhaps my most favorite out of all of them, Space Lion. So here you are as an American, watching this show that makes all these references to movies you've seen, backed by music you're not only comfortable with, but also kicks all sorts of ass. And it's well animated, well written, well acted, well directed, and well choreographed. And to top it all off, it is unlike anything you have ever seen before. It doesn't take a genius to see why this caught on in America. But the show couldn't coast on its American appeal for long, and thankfully it didn't try to. People tend to overlook the fact that Cowboy Bebop was a sci-fi anime, and those tend to be alienating to newcomers to the genre. When you get down to it, the only reason why people watched Cowboy Bebop and kept watching it was because for an anime, it was incredibly accessible, not just because of its American appeal. The world that the story is set in is fleshed out and nothing important is left unexplained. There are no alien cultures to muddy the narrative, though the Earth population brings their own brand of eccentricity, and the technology seems advanced but grounded in modern notions of how technology would progress.